I am talking with Nick Robertson and one of the THQ community managers for UFC Undisputed series. Nick, thanks for taking the time. How are you?
It's going all right, man. Got our review scores starting to come in, and so far it's looking really good. So, starting the week off right.
That's great. I know the game releases tomorrow. I know you're pretty pumped about it. You've been working on it for quite a while, considering you had a year off from the last game. Can you explain the whole process of, was it always a concentration to take a year off in terms of building up better development for the next UFC game, or was it just something that happened sporadically?
It was kind of our reaction to what happened with 2010. Before the plan was to do yearly titles, we did 2009. That did great. 2010 came out and it did okay. It did all right numbers. But there were things that weren't well received. The online portion of the game wasn't too well received, and a lot of the changes that we made weren't necessarily noticeable or obvious, and so a lot of people felt like it was the same game as 2009. So we really wanted to take the time and make sure that we were adding a lot of cool new features that were very obvious to new users or to old users, and that we took the time to make sure that the quality was up there and that our online would be a solid online offering and that the game was going to be really smooth and balanced. And I think that time off paid off, definitely.
Gotcha. In terms of the time off, I know you guys introduced a new part of the game this year, including Pride. How was the process of introducing Pride into the game, and how difficult was it to getting, such as the announcers and the public address announcer for the game as well?
It definitely it was something we'd wanted to put in the game. A lot of us in the office are big MMA fans, and some of us are big Pride fans too. So it was something we wanted to put in the game, have a new rule set. It'd be kind of a cool new presentation as well. Pride was all about the presentation as well as the combat, and so we did want to give that authentic feel. We went through and we got the announcers, Boss Root and Steven Quadros, and we got the screaming lady, Lenny Hart. It was definitely more difficult than putting together the UFC portion of the game, especially when it comes to fighters. With UFC, they're already contracted to do the game, and with all the Pride fighters and Pride announcers, we had to do individual contracts. We had to seek each of those people out individually, which made it a little bit more of a difficult task. But I think it was worth it because that part of the game is definitely fun.
And what was the reaction from the people that you had to independently contract of when you asked them to do this part of the Pride game? What was their reaction of getting back into their roots, basically?
A lot of them were really stoked. A lot of people didn't even realize what they were doing. One example, because we did, with the Pride guys, we couldn't build their models the same way we did with the UFC guys. The UFC guys were able to have them come in, and we can do photos and then model them off of the photos. With the Pride guys, Pride ended almost 10 years ago, so all those guys are a lot different looking now. So we had to model them based off of old photos. So I think that their management kind of did contracts for them, because guys like Gary Goodridge, he's in the game, he's in the Pride heavyweight roster. He had no idea he was in the game. He heard that there was Pride coming out in the game, and he was like petitioning to get in, not knowing that he was already in the roster. So it was an interesting process, and definitely less hands-on with the fighters than it is when we did the UFC portion of the game.
Gotcha. In terms of, I know a lot of fans been asking from the last year's game, with terms of feedback. I know you're always on the message boards and forums looking to get feedback. How much of the feedback from the fans that buy the game and previous games that you put into the game for this year and future titles?
Yeah, definitely. We went through. We pay a lot of attention to our forums and Twitter and Facebook, and we noticed a lot of suggestions that they were making were solid suggestions. Things to do with combat. People weren't digging the submission system. So we took a lot of that to heart, and we tried to address as much as we could. There's certain things, some guys are going to demand things that aren't necessarily realistic or a good game design. Some guys will have ideas that in their head sound good, but when you put it on paper, it's not necessarily a great idea. It isn't really functional. So we took the feedback that we felt we could achieve real results with. And kind of not ignored, but kind of pushed to the side the stuff that wasn't necessarily realistic. To hopefully maybe implement in future versions, or just put to the side and see about evaluating later. So it was something we definitely wanted to do. The game, it is our game, but we make it for the fans. So if there's things that they don't like, we definitely want to take those into consideration and make adjustments.
Mm-hmm. And touching on the fan thing, I know that you talked about a little bit about the submission system. How long did it take to implement the new submission system in terms compared to the old one?
It took quite a while. The submission system was being tweaked up until the last couple months of our development, and it went through many different iterations, a lot of different graphical styles, and a couple of different, prototypes for how we were going to do it. But this one felt the best for us. We knew we were onto something good, and so we just spent the last month or two just making little tweaks here and there to make sure it felt balanced, it felt fun, and it felt like something that normal players could achieve against high levels of AI even. Yeah.
And in terms of downloadable content, I know that's a big thing now with Xbox and PlayStation 3. How much thought did you put into downloadable content, such as fighters and other things that go along with the game?
We put a lot of thought into it. We'd gotten a lot of feedback on our DLC offerings before. The last couple of games, it was pretty slim. It was basically Ultimate Fighter packs with like recent winners and a couple of the higher profile guys from there. And people weren't necessarily digging that, so went back to the drawing board and we worked with the UFC to figure out fighters that were going to be up and coming around the time of the game release, or that we expected to be up and coming. And then guys that just had a lot of potential to go really far. So we definitely wanted to improve the DLC offering this year, and I think working with Zuffa, we were able to figure out some really cool guys to offer up this time around that'll be a big step up from previous iterations.
And in terms of Zuffa, how was the relationship with Zuffa and working with them and with the game development? Were they helpful in any way possible in terms of getting the game and whatever you guys need in terms of making the game the best it can be?
Oh yeah, definitely. Zuffa is very hands-on with the game, and they help us every step of the way. Everything that we work on, we take to Zuffa, including combat stuff, the submission system, for example. We work very closely with them. We get their feedback on it, because they know the sport like the back of their hands. It's stuff they've been doing for a living for a while now. So with everything that we do, including roster, stats, combat adjustments, the inclusion of new game modes like Pride, all of that stuff, Zuffa is very hands-on. They give us a lot of good feedback on the stuff that we're implementing too. So we're getting not just the game design perspective, but that mixed martial arts perspective from the pros.
Mm-hmm. And touching real quick on the downloadable content again, is there a time frame where you guys stop downloadable content for being available, or is it going to be a much more lengthier process than before in terms of offering more stuff?
So as of right now, we've got our pre-order DLC pack of fighters, and that will become available if you didn't pre-order 90 days after release. And then we've got 2 DLC packs coming up after that, the International DLC pack and the Fight of the Night DLC pack. Mm-hmm. So we've got a pretty good chunk of DLC mapped out for the next few months. But we're hearing people talk about the roster and people that they still want to see in there. So we're evaluating it. We're definitely not counting out doing more DLC. There's nothing planned right now, but if it sells well and people want more fighters and Zuffa's on board, then we're gonna do what we have to do.
Awesome. And in your opinion, I know you've been working on the game for a while, and I believe you worked on the last 2010, I believe.
Yeah, I worked in testing on 2009 too, so I've been on board since the beginning.
So you've seen everything from the first game up to this game. How's the development been since the first game and now? Has it been easier or harder on you in terms of seeing from testing all the way to where you are now?
I think it's for me it's gotten easier because I've been able to get more hands-on as I move forward. When I was in testing, I'm a big mixed martial arts fan, so I had a lot of ideas, a lot of big ideas, and I didn't have the perspective, the production and design perspective on how those things have to happen. So when I first started off, I was making all sorts of crazy demands, kind of like, hey, this needs to be in the game. If we don't have this in, this is stupid. And as I've kind of moved over, worked with Zuffa, worked with the production and design guys, I kind of got to see that inside perspective on how things work. It's gotten easier because I've got more realistic expectations of what can be done. And so I'm a lot less disappointed when I'm pitching ideas because the things that I'm coming up with are a lot more realistic, and I feel like I have more of an impact on the game.
And you train as well, correct?
Yeah, I train jiu-jitsu, 10th Planet with Eddie Bravo and his brown belt Alder Hampel.
Gotcha. Because I know not many people that work on the game itself are accustomed to what the sport is all about. Do you think that's helpful in terms of your job and trying to make the game better every year with a background in jiu-jitsu?
I think so, definitely. The ground game is a very complicated aspect of mixed martial arts, and it's kind of the most foreign aspect of martial arts to people. So trying to translate that into a game is tough already. Trying to translate it into a game and make it something that is easily playable by people that have no idea what it is very tough. And so I train jiu-jitsu. Our senior designer, Wes Bunn, he also trains jiu-jitsu, and we brought in guys like Mark Lehman and Eddie Bravo to help us check out the animations, review the stuff that we're doing to make sure it's accurate, and it's smooth, and it's realistic. And I think it's definitely something that if we didn't have that experience, it would be a lot harder to get done.
Gotcha. And one last thing, Nick, before I let you go, what do you think is your favorite part of this year's game compared to any other game you developed in terms of the UFC? What is your favorite part of the game that was implemented this year?
Oh, I'd have to say Pride Mode. I've been a big MMA fan for a long time, and I was a Pride fanboy back in the day. I was a huge Crow Cop and Rampage fan, so to be able to see Pride represented in the game and represented accurately with all of the the bells and whistles with the presentation is awesome. And the brutality aspect is what gets me though. The soccer kicks, stomping people in the face, kneeing them on the head on the ground. That's just so satisfying to me to be able to play one of my buddies or one of the guys in the office and soccer kick them and run up and start stomping their face right afterwards is exponentially more satisfying than just knocking them out in UFC. So that's definitely the addition that appeals to me the most.
Nick, I appreciate the time. Definitely check out UFC Undisputed 3 tomorrow, February 14th. It is on Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3.